Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is Yoel Kortik, Senior Librarian at Ex Libris, and today we're going to be discussing letter configuration in Alma. We will be discussing the entire process for letter configuration in Alma, and we will also be pointing out new features in the August 2023 release of Alma. We will be looking at this PowerPoint presentation briefly, and we will primarily be looking inside Alma, going through the process of editing the letters. Those of you watching this video via YouTube can see inside the description of the video a link to this PowerPoint presentation, and you're free to download this and view it on your own as well, because we will not be looking in depth at this PowerPoint. We will be primarily inside Alma. So what will we be discussing today? Just a general introduction to start. Then we'll be looking at accessing the letters configuration page. And then something new in the August 2023 release is the XSL XML editors. Drafts for letters in the XSL editor is also something new. And drafts for the components in the XSL editor is also new. And we'll be looking at the components configuration as well and discussing what is the components configuration. So like I mentioned, what we're showing here includes new features for August 2023. However, we're showing the entire process, some of which has remained the same since before August 2023 release. And let's jump right in. So let's go see where we can configure the letters. Before we can configure the letters, we need a role of the letter administrator. So I'm logged in here as Alicia Chen. You may know Alicia from previous sessions we've done. And I'm going to look at her roles, and we see that she has letter administrator here. So what I'm doing now is because I have the role letter administrator. So if you're trying this on your own instance of Alma and for some reason don't have access to what I'll be showing, it's likely because you do not have the letter administrator role. So that is a prerequisite. So in order to access the letters, we'll come to configuration here on the bottom left, and then we're in general, and then we have letters configuration. I will point out now, while we're here, that all of the menu options you can access via clicking on the icon on the top left of the side menu and just starting to write anything. That's not only for letter configuration, but that's for everything. That's just a side note, not specifically related to letters configuration. However, we see here we can also access the letters configuration this way as well. So this brings us to the letters configuration page. A few things to point out here before we start editing a letter. Whether or not a letter is enabled in this first column here, that determines whether the letter will be printed. If a letter is not enabled here, it will not be printed. When I say printed, I mean also sent via email. Or printed for that matter, depending on all of the configurations around this. But if it's not enabled, it won't be printed. So that's the first thing, the first column there. Then we have retention period. Retention period is relevant for letters which are saved in the attachments tab of a user. For example, if we come back to my user here that I'm logged in as, Alicia Chen, let's go take a look at Alicia. In the attachment tab, we'll see that letters that have been sent to Alicia are saved there in the attachments tab. And different places have different rules of how long they need to save these letters. And that's the retention period. So if you say 100 days, for example, then the letters will be retained here for 100 days. Anything older than 100 days will be deleted. There is a weekly job that runs that will delete them. So let's go back now to the letters configuration page. And we already discussed the fact that a letter needs to be enabled. And we talked about the retention period, which is how long a letter will remain in the attachments tab. And let's now begin editing a letter. Before that, let's pop into the PowerPoint and just make sure we covered everything so far. So we talked about the enabling of a letter. We talked about the letter retention. This is an example we showed of attachments. This is the weekly job that I mentioned that removes those letters that are older than the retention period. And now we can jump right in and start editing letters. And we're going to start with an example of the borrowing activity letter. So let's jump right in there, and we will edit now the borrowing activity letter. So this you'll see, those of you who have not yet seen the August 2023 release will note that this is a brand new interface here. So what do we have? On the top left, we've got the XSL editor. On the bottom, we have an XML editor. Then on the right side, we have a preview. Now, everything here is what you see is what you get. And by that, I mean, if we change anything in the XSL or in the XML, then that change will immediately be reflected in the preview. And therefore, it's a lot easier now to edit the XSL, and because you can immediately see what the possible results are. And you can also save it as a draft as you're going along. You can also have this sent to your email with an example of the letter and with a attached XSL version. So for example, you can see here we would like to remind you that you have the following items at your disposal. So that is red bold, as we can see, and we can see it's also in a large font. And that's because here we have edited this, the reminder message. We'll talk about where these messages are coming from in a moment. So let me just close that. Sorry about that. And if I change this now, instead of red, for example, I were to put blue, 1, 2, 3, blue, and I were to change my font size, for example, to 3, and just step away, you can see it immediately changed here. It immediately changes. Any change I make here in the XSL gets immediately changed here in the letter. If we scroll down, for example, we have loans on top here. Then we have a description of the loans, and I can see everything here on the left side in the XSL. So this loans is centered. And if I were to come along here and get rid of the center, we'll see that it will no longer be centered. Let's wait a moment while that refreshes on the right. And there we go. Now we'll go take a look. It's no longer centered. So it's what you see is what you get, with a very easy way to see what are the possible results. And not only that, if by chance we were to make a mistake here with something, and I were to forget, for example, let's say I want to change the font color here for this loans. So if I were to come in here and say font color equals red, close that, and then I'll take this close font and put it over here. And let's say by accident, I forgot to close that font here, my last font. So I immediately get an error message with the line number and exactly what is wrong. It says the tag element for font must end with a greater than sign delimiter. So another nice feature there that can greatly assist as we edit the letters. The XML is the data that appears in the letter. So for example, it says here her name, Carolyn, and it says the address. And then if we come down here, we've got the different information in here. All of this is coming from the XML. Now, I can also view this XML in a larger full page. So, for example, we have here Romeo and Juliet, William Shakespeare. If I want to test this instead of Romeo and Juliet, I want to see, for example, how is a different font or how is a different script going to appear? I can edit this XML. First, let's make it larger. We've got the full screen option here. We also have the full screen option, by the way, when doing the XSL. Let's make the XML here a little bigger and load this. So I can download this, open it up however I would like. Let's take this show in folder, and I'll edit it with Notepad++. And if we say here, for example, Romeo and Juliet, so I've got Romeo and Juliet here, and I can do a replace. Let's replace all of the Romeo and Juliets with, let's say I'm interested now in how would a different script appear. So I can call this now something in a different script I'm writing. It's Romeo and Juliet, but in a different script. Okay, maybe we'll even spell it a little different. And replace all. Now, I could change this in the editor in Alma. I can also save it right here. Let's say File, Save As. And I'm going to call this Borrowing Activity Letter. We'll keep it, of course, in the XML. And we'll call it Borrowing Activity Letter 2023-0703. Save. So I've saved that. Again, when we're here in Alma, I could do my editing right in here. I could come along and just change something right here. I could also just replace this. I could come along here, take everything here, come back into Alma, take everything here. I did a Control V and replaced it all, and I will save. Now the X here will close this full screen, and now I'm back in here. Let's go take a look now at what we see here. Now we see already the change here, because that change was reflected from here. We can also change the XML in another way. We can take real examples of letters that have already been sent, in this case to patrons. It's the borrowing activity letter. If it was a letter to the vendors for ordering purchase order lines, for example, we could take that letter, anything which has already been used. And we can do that by clicking here, Letter Examples on the top. And these are examples which have been sent if I say add from system letters. So these are letters which have been sent. So I can replace what I just did now with a letter which was sent, for example, at 1732 on June 30th. I'll just do that. Then I have the borrowing activity letter from that time. And I could make that the default. Whatever is chosen here as the default is what appears in the bottom left. I chose that one now, and I will say save. And now we've got a different XML here. And if we come down here, we have different examples. Now we have an example in Chinese, and the other one was to Carolyn DeVue, and this one is to Alicia Hen. We can also upload an XML from our PC. If you recall, a few moments ago, I saved that XML on the PC. So again, we can come up here to Letter Examples, and I can say Upload Letter Example. And now I saved that in my downloads. Here it is. We saved this one just a few moments ago. Now I'm uploading that one again. Upload. And done. And save. Now it's uploaded, but if I want that to be the default, I need to say that I want it to be the default for the preview. Again, in Letter Examples, this is the one we saved. We called it 2023-0703 in the suffix. I will make that the default now and save. Again, all of this is in the PowerPoint. It says XML was replaced. All of this is in the PowerPoint. You can read it. Now, again, we have this to Carolyn DeVue, and we have our different examples here. So we talked about the XSL editor. We talked about the XML editor. We talked about changing the XML which is being used. Now, the labels. You will notice that in the XSL, there are cases where there's text surrounded by two @ signs. In fact, let's make this full screen so we can see it better. So here we have an example. Then also you'll see it's made of a table, the list of the items on loan. So for example, here we have title, due date, fine, description, and they're all surrounded by the two at signs. And then we've got the title, due date, normalized fine, and description here. So the labels are coming from here. So right now we have title, due date, and fine. Let's focus on the title, due date, and fine. And I'm going to close this full screen. So for title, due date, and fine, it says title of item, return on, and fines and fees. Then, of course, we also have the description, which we're not going to change. The reason for title, it says title of item, is because it's defined in the labels. Anything that is surrounded by these two at signs is a label. Let's go take a look at the labels. So up on top here, we're going to click Labels. And here's fine. It says fines and fees. I'm going to call this now Fines Video. Just so we know, sorry, wrong language. Just so we know this is coming from what we're doing right now. Then we also had title, which said title of item there. Let's call this title. Also, this is for our video. And then we had fines and fees. So we'll have a label here called fines and fees. Oh, fines and fees we did, and due date. Here we'll say due date. We'll also say video, just so we know these are the ones coming from what we just defined here. And we'll say save. And let's see what's going to happen now. There we go. So they already changed. It says title video, due date video, fines video. They're coming from the labels. They're coming from anything which is here. By the way, this message up here, we would like to remind you that you have the following items at your disposal, is also coming from a message, from a label, and that label is called loans. Here. So we have all of these. This is the blue one here. So we know that's coming from whatever is defined as blue here. That's coming from the reminder message. Reminder message is we would like to remind you that you have the following items at your disposal. Reminder message, here it is. Let's go look at the labels one more time. So the reminder message, here it is. We would like to inform you that you have the following items on display at your following items at your disposal. We can also take these labels and restore. I'm going to restore this one, and now it's back to title. Restore puts it back to whatever the default is. The default is in the grays. You'll see once we restore it, it's no longer white, it's gray. And we'll do the same with the fines video. So now we're back to the defaults, and they're all in the defaults now. Let's say save. And now these should all go back to the way they were. Yep, title, due date, fine, and description. Let's take that loans there, and let's stop that one from being red. So we'll remove the font color red from here. And we will remove the close font. And let's say I want to make this centered where it says loans. And I can just skip using the label, and I could write my own text here. So instead of this loans here, I could write my own text and say, these are the items you currently have on loan. I could do it like that. And we'll see here how it looks. There it is. These are the items you currently have on loan. So now I'm not using one of the labels. I'm going to put the label back now. And now it's back to whatever the label is. While I'm editing this, let's do one other change. Let me center this one. We'll say center, and we will close the center. Center, close center. There we go. So there it is now centered. Now, if I want to see not only in the preview, but also I want to save this XSL or do whatever with this XSL, if I click send here, on the bottom right, it says send example by email. First, let me click send, and then I'll discuss it. Okay, that was sent. So this is giving by default the email of the logged in user. I know I'm logged in as Alicia Hen, but I gave Alicia Hen my email so I can start checking things. By default, it puts here the email of the logged in user. That is the email of the logged in user. But I could change this and decide to send it to some other email and just write a different email here. So that now gets sent to Alma. There it is, arrived right now, 4:55 p.m. July 3rd. That's my local time. And if we click here, we see it's centered here, the loans, even though I didn't save this yet. It's really what you see is what you get. I'm in the middle of editing the XSL. I already see in the preview how it looks. Now I want to see how does it look when it's sent by mail. And I also have here a copy of the XSL, and I could do whatever I want with it. I could open it here and start editing it. I could save it, keep it on the side, whatever. I'm getting my own copy of the XSL. So that covers what we wanted to look at for the XSL editing, the XML editing. We still want to talk about the saving of the drafts and the components. However, let's go back to the PowerPoint briefly. I'm going to get out of here, cancel. I'm not going to save any of these changes we did now. And let's just see what we covered here, and then we'll start looking at the drafts and the components. So we saw that there's three parts of that page that opens up: the XSL editor, the XML editor, and the view. And we saw that on the top we have a link to the labels, a link to the letter examples. We saw that as soon as somebody starts editing the XSL here, immediately the changes are viewed in the XSL editor. We made a change by changing something to centered. I think we also changed the font. In this PowerPoint presentation, we have a similar change where we changed the reminder message, and we immediately see it in the preview. We also saw that if I, by accident, make an error, in the preview pane, we're notified of what the error is and where the error is. So it makes it very easy to figure out what's going on here. We also saw that while we're editing it, we can click send on the bottom right, and we did an example of this. And then we saw that we get whatever changes we made, even if we did not yet save the letter. And we also get attached the XSL. Let's talk about the contributions. That's also an important thing. And then we already did the XML editor. We're not going to go through that here as well, but we will do the contributions. We talked about the labels. That's where we can change anything that starts and ends in the two @ signs. We went into the labels and we changed them to see that they immediately change. We added parentheses video at the end, and we saw that it changed as soon as we went back and looked at the preview. So let's go back into this borrowing activity letter. And here, with these three dots where there's more actions, we can contribute something here. So let's say I make some kind of special change here, and I want to share this with other users, other Alma institutions in the world. So I can come here and say, contribute. Overwrite. So I already contributed this one, but I'm going to overwrite what I contributed. So now I can give this a description. This is a letter which we edited during a training session and now are contributing. Now this goes into the community. Let's say confirm, the community folder. And now anybody, we got a message up here that it was contributed. Any other institution in the world now can come and copy that. And we can see many examples of ones that people have contributed. I'm going to click those three dots again and come to the shared XSLs. And here we can see all of the ones that someone has already contributed. You can see the institutions here that have contributed, and you can see the contacts, because when we contribute, it gives by default the email of the logged in user, and while contributing, it can be changed. And in most cases, people have also given a description so people know what is there that they can copy. I'm going to delete the one that I already did, and I can delete it because I'm the institution who contributed it. So I'm deleting that one, and we're good. Okay. The remote contribution was deleted. Now, let's start talking about the drafts. So it's possible while editing a letter that someone is in the middle of editing, and it used to be that if you wanted to save what you were doing and later on go work on it, you would need to save that on the side on your PC. Now you can save it in Alma as a draft, and then later you can save it as the actual live in-use XSL, or you can remove the draft if you decide it's something you don't want to do. So for example, we're going to do this right now. We're going to change something, and then we're going to save it as a draft. And then we're going to see that we have an indication that it's a draft. And we can come back and continue editing the draft. And we're going to see that in the preview, we have an indication that it's a draft. And then once we're happy with our change, we can click save. And then it's no longer going to be a draft. It's going to be the real one. We can also remove the draft after we're in the middle of using it and decide we no longer want it. So let's do that. So I'm going to come out of here just so we can see from the beginning how we get here again. So we went to General, Letters Configuration, and we choose a letter. And I'm using the borrowing activity letter with channel email. Let's go edit that again. So let's say I begin to edit this. Let's put this in full view mode, full screen. And let's say I want to change something here. Let's say I want the title to be after the due date. So I'm going to change it here. This is the part of the table which is the top, the first row. That means I also need to change the actual data that's coming, and I'll make that also the second row here. Okay, so I made the title come after the due date. And let's say I also want the text of this title to be font color equals red. Close that font and close it here. I think that's okay. Let's also make this strong. And let's close the strong. So we have font strong, and then we close it with strong font. Okay. I'm going to put this small so we can see the preview. Let's make sure it's okay. Okay, so due date is now after the title. Let's suffice with that for now. We will remove these here. They're probably being overridden by another component in that table, but we have changed the order here. So we have title after the due date. And let's remove the description altogether. Say we don't want the description. I'll remove it from here, and I'll remove it from here. Okay, so now we have just the due date, the title, and the fine, and the title is second. So we made some changes, and I decide I don't want to save this yet, but I like what I've done so far. I'm going to save it as a draft. We immediately see that this is a draft. This is not what this indication in the preview pane, the watermark. We also know this is a draft. When we're out of here, I'm not going to click Save yet. I'm going to go back to the list here. And for the borrowing activity letter, we see here also an indication that it's a draft. And we see also here that it's a draft because I can edit the draft, remove the draft. For other letters, it's just edit. Here, it's edit draft, remove draft. So people are sure, whoever is the staff user here dealing with this, they are sure that it's a draft. There's no way that by accident they thought it was a real letter. Let's go back into the edit draft, and I can remove the draft from here, but I'm going to click Save up here on the top. Are you sure you want to save the XSL draft permanently? This action will override the current XSL. Fine. So now that is the real letter. I've had that draft. I went out. I came in at another time. And now we see here, I've got the title after the due date. I don't have the description. So I have successfully taken my draft and made it the real active in-use XSL, excuse me. We can also do a restore here. Restore, I'm clicking Restore right here on the top. This puts it back to the original. When I say original, the original version of Alma. We're going to scroll down here now. This is the out-of-the-box way we go. You see we don't have any centers and bolds and reds and blues and all the other stuff we were playing around with. We have the title at the beginning and the due date the second. We have the description here. All the things we changed are no longer there. So that's using the drafts. Let's head back to the PowerPoint, and we're going to talk about the components configuration. The components are parts of letters that are called from other parts of letters. For example, if we look at this borrowing activity letter, we have this whole include section here. It has include header, include sender receiver, include mail reason, include footer, include style, include record title. Let's play around with the footer for a moment. So if we scroll down here, we see my account is on the right. We see contact us is on the left. Let's say we want to change that, and that's coming from the footer. Now, when we change one of these components, we need to keep in mind that they are being called by many letters. Many letters are using the header and the footer, and these other ones here that are also being called. So let's say we want to change that footer. So we're going to go now to the components configuration and change the footer. We could also change the header if we want, but let's see. So we're going to head over to the footers, the components, and do the footer. So we're, again, general, letters, components configuration. Previously we did letters configuration. Now we're doing components configuration. Here's the footer. Let's edit the footer. And you can see here on the bottom, here's the My Account. And here's the contact. Let's say instead of on the right, I want this My Account to be in the center. So I change that to center. I'll change this to center as well. I've made a change. I'm going to save it. Now we can also save this as a draft, and we're going to do that later. But first I'm just going to save it. So we'll say save. Saved successfully. So now let's go preview any letter that uses this footer. We already saved this. Let's also look while we're at it at the header. So we've got the header XSL here as well. Here's, for example, where the logo is inserted. So let's move the logo also. So we have here class align left, cell padding 5, border 0. Then we have the letter name appearing in an H1. Then we have the current date. Let's say we don't want the logo. I'm going to remove the whole logo section. I'm going to take this out, delete, and save. So it's not going to look so wonderful, but we want to show that we're changing the header and the footer. Okay, let's now go look at the letters configuration and see what's happened. So we're in General, Letters configuration. And here's a borrowing activity letter. Okay, we don't have the logo here. You can see there's no logo. And you can see my account is in the center. So it's calling the header and the footer as a component because it's listed here that it's the component. Let's go back to the components and restore those two. Then we're going to talk about drafts for the components. So let's take this footer, edit, and restore. I'm clicking restore on the top right, restore. Everything's good there. Let's do the same now with the header. So we're back here. Now we'll take the header. We will restore here. Let's go take a look at the letter now. Back to letters configuration. Let's take that borrowing activity letter and see how it looks now. And it's still got the My Account in the middle. Let's see what's happening here. It's calling the footer. Still has that in the center. Let's see what happened there. So we'll come back to General, Components Configuration. I may have forgotten to press something. We're going to come to this footer. And let's go take a look here. Oh, we've got center. I'm going to say right. I'm also going to say, I think I didn't click save after we did restore. Okay, yep, it even says press save for the change to take effect. Okay, save. I'm going to do that for the header too in case I forgot there. So that was saved. We need to restore and then click save. So now we'll do the same with the header. Yeah, it looks like here the logo is not there, so we're going to do restore and save. Great. So now let's go take a look again. Letters configuration and borrowing activity letter. And now we have the logo. You can see the logo here. And we have this on the right. So that's the components. Now, it's also possible to use the components as drafts. It may be that I want to make some kind of change here. And before I do that, I want to save it as a draft and see how is it going to look. So let's see how we do that now. And again, everything is explained here in the PowerPoint. And now we're on the section of drafts for components. We're going to go into the components. We're going to change something, and then we're going to save it as a draft. Then we're going to see there's a unique way of calling these drafts. So, General, Components Configuration. Let's do it with the header and the footer again. So let's say header. And what do we want to change here in the letter? Maybe I don't want the date. I'm going to remove the date here. Let's make sure I'm not ruining the XSL. That looks okay. I got the open and the close. Or you know what? I'm going to put the date in the center. And now I'm going to click Save Draft. And it immediately, like when we were in the letters, it immediately gives me an indication that this is a draft. Now let's go look at the footer. And we will edit. And let's say here, instead of the My Account here, I'm just going to put a hard-coded text, which is going to be access your account here. Let's make that close strong, close font, and here we'll say font color equals red, close that, and open a strong. Okay. So we have open font, open strong, close font, save as draft. So now we have 2 drafts. And if we come back to the list, we'll see that these are drafts. There's an indication in the list here, XSL draft, just like we had before. And here we have edit draft, remove draft, as opposed to just a regular edit on the other ones. Now, let's come back to the letter and call this header and footer. So in order to call the header and footer that are drafts, we need to change the way they're called inside the letter. And we do that by changing header XSL to header XSL underline capital draft. And we'll do the same with the footer, underline capital draft. And that is explained also. Here you can see it's red bold now. Access your account here. It's the hard-coded text that I made. And that's explained all here, that if we want to call a draft, we change it to underline draft with the capitals. And we can see that happening live right here. We see that I'm calling the header and the footer, and you can see the example that we changed ours to access your account here. And if I decide that's what I want, then I can save it. And if I decide that's not what I want, then I can get rid of it. So let's say here, I decide I don't want to use these drafts. So I'm going to remove the calls to the drafts here. Just removing the underlined draft. And failed on parsing, let's see. Oh, because I deleted the L here as well. But isn't that nice? It says exactly what the problem is. Okay. When I got rid of the underlined draft, I also got rid of the L and the XSL. Okay, now we're back to normal. It's got the regular My Account. And I don't even need to save anything because all I did was test it in the preview. Let's go back to those drafts now and get rid of them. I don't want the drafts now. I decided I tested it, but I don't want it anymore. So we'll come into the general. We'll come back to these components configuration. And I can remove the draft either from here by saying remove draft, or I can edit and then here say remove draft. So now everything is back to normal. We'll come back here to the general, to the letters configuration. Let's go take a look one more time, make sure everything's okay. So borrowing activity letter. And we're looking in the preview. And everything looks good here. And we've got the My Account on the bottom right. And that concludes our session on letter configuration in Alma. Again, the link to that PowerPoint presentation is in the description of the YouTube video. So you're all welcome to go take a look at that there. And we hope to see you in our future sessions. Have a nice day.